Hi, everybody. For those who have just logged in, we'll begin the webinar in about 3 minutes. All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're logging in from. Welcome to the webinar hosted by Citrix Ready and Guardicore today, which is titled as Enabling Business Continuity Without Compromising on Security. A quick introduction to the speakers. We have Avishag Danieli from Guardicore, who's the Director of Product Management, and Anil Kumar from Citrix, who is our Technical Marketing Manager. They'll be taking you through today's webinar. A few housekeeping pointers before we begin. We will have a quick question answer session towards the end of the webinar. Please feel free to post your questions in the question box in your control panel. And depending on how much time we have, we will be answering as many questions as possible. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the slide to our speaker, Anil Kumar. Over to you, Anil.
Thanks, Manasa. I'm Anil Kumar. I'm a technical marketing manager at Citrix. I mainly coordinate and manage with networking and security partners in the Citrix Ready program. And before we get started, I wanted to kind of provide a very brief overview on what Citrix Ready is. Citrix Ready identifies recommended solutions that are trusted to enhance your Citrix environment for digital workspace, networking, and cloud services. All the products featured in our marketplace have completed verification testing, thereby providing confidence and joint solution compatibility. And through the online catalog and Citrix Ready branding program, you can easily find and build a trusted infrastructure. You can visit Citrix Ready Marketplace at the below link, citrixready.citrix.com. And with that said, I'm going to hand over controls to Avishag, our main speaker from Guardicore.
Thanks, Anil. So let me briefly go over the agenda. what we have planned for today is to talk about the reality that we're all facing now given the current pandemic and how this is affecting remote access and security of this landscape. We'll also be talking about how to potentially solve these challenges of modern remote access with a few Gartner takeaways. And then we'll touch on Citrix virtualized environments. What is the solution by Citrix? We're going to cover Guardicore and how Guardicore simplifies segmentation. And then we're going to talk about Citrix and Guardicore together, how we're better together with some live demos, including Guardicore's user identity-based policies, again, with some live demos. We'll also cover a real customer use case of Guardicore and Citrix together, and we'll end with a few notes around Guardicore's free offer for to cover virtual desktops today, given this current pandemic, until the end of 2020. Let's start. Let me just see how I can pass the slide. So what we see companies today, or basically given the different companies that you might work for today, some companies are dealing with today's reality of moving to work from home at scale in different manners. Some companies might have some regulations in place and some protocols in place to work from home. You might have some setup, maybe a VPN, maybe you're using virtual desktops. But on the other hand, some other companies don't have regulations in place, and today's reality and the current pandemic have actually caused all the users to move to work from home, and companies had to very quickly adjust, all companies had to very quickly adjust to the scale of working from home. So a few different ways that companies are dealing with this is by setting up either endpoints with VPN connections, using virtual desktops like Citrix on premises, or Citrix managed desktops, or any other solution provided as desktop as a service. And you might be setting up jump boxes or terminal servers to manage multiple users from different user groups and make sure that they can access the data center or the applications that they need access to. So what would you traditionally do to secure these environments to enable this work from home at scale? So what we see that the companies actually need is, of course, to enable business continuity and to enable users to still access the applications that they need access to, while preventing them, securing them, and preventing them from accessing the applications that they don't need access to. So what you would traditionally find companies doing is setting up different jump boxes or different terminal servers or different groups of virtual desktops with specific routing. So network configuration is involved, and firewall changes are involved. And basically, you'll see yourself setting up different rules in different places and playing around with network configuration just to be able to secure those environments and enable users to access the environments that they need access to, while again preventing them from accessing what they shouldn't. And what this actually leads to is very high costs for proper security. You're either over provisioning hardware, or given today's environment, it's a huge operational burden for IT teams and security teams, because the scale involved actually causes teams to eventually compromise on security. Just to be able to enable users the continuous access to the applications that they need access to, we find companies actually compromising on security by enabling what we call a one-size-fits-all access privilege and basically rely on authentication. Now, I think we all could agree that lateral movement is a huge risk to environments, and it is a necessity to be able to prevent users from even that initial access to what they shouldn't have access to. So basically what we see again is the compromise where companies create a one-size-fits-all access privilege. Another thing that we see that is another compromise that a lot of companies have right now is that they have a lot of blind spots to the user environment. So you might be setting up all these environments really fast. You might enable access over VPN or for a virtual desktop, and you don't have the visibility necessary into those environments to understand what your users are doing, and of course control then what they can access and what they are doing. So you have limited visibility, And eventually, just to be able to set up everything in a timely manner, you bypass security controls, such as firewalls, and again, everything that I mentioned before. So you bypass the existing security controls just to be able to enable that initial access. And we all know, I think, that in the security chain, humans are the weakest link, and potentially polluted home environments or potentially polluted home setups are actually introducing a lot of risk into your data center. So how does Gartner relate to this? What are they mentioning here? So Gartner, in their Solving the Challenges of Modern Remote Access paper, we have a few takeaways from what they mentioned there. And a few of the key findings that they mention here is, first and foremost, that most organizations only have specific capacity and licenses to handle their users. So given today's pandemic, you might not have sufficient licenses or infrastructure to enable that access. So we do see a lot of companies moving to cloud environments or to cloud setups to enable users the access that they need access to. Another thing that we see here from Gartner is that they're saying that VPNs are being used and there's a lot of resources and consumptions that users are doing over VPN. And basically what we can see here is that there's always on VPN access, even when you don't need VPN to be on. So if you're using, for example, cloud-based applications, SaaS services, etc., you might not necessarily need your VPN to be on, and a lot of VPN consumption that is not really needed is being used. So there's a lot of, let's call it, stress on the environment when there's no real need for it. And what another thing that Gartner mentioned is that deployed technology is often out of date. So you might have systems and applications that are out of date and need to be updated, or even need new licenses just to be able to support your users working in remote. And we also see that a lot of organizations lack the required bandwidth to support this remote access at scale. Now, what do they actually recommend? So a few things here. The first thing is to understand what access users need, is to be able to determine what are the requirements that users need for on-premises or cloud applications. And here we'll actually show you later on in the live demo how Guardicore's Reveal and Visibility enables you to determine what access your users need and what are their requirements. So it starts with understanding what you need to set up in your environment. Another thing that Gartner mentioned here is to make sure that the products that you choose can scale. And we'll actually touch on this in the live use case, in the real use case, a customer use case of both Citrix and Guardicore together later on in this webinar. And another thing that Gartner mentions here is the need to evaluate risks of unknown devices. So basically understand how your different applications and what the different systems that you have in your environment are, and how they communicate and what they access in your environment. So again, here we'll see how Guardicore's Reveal enables you to understand and evaluate the risk of those unknown devices, as well as any other application in your environment. And another thing that Gartner mentioned is the necessity to develop a usable remote work policy, something that is agreed upon and that you can take and that qualifies with and passes local law to make sure that your users comply and that you are able to set up the required access. At this point, I'm going to pass it back to Anil to talk a little bit more around what Citrix offers.
Thanks, Avishag. I think that set the stage really well into today's reality in terms of enabling remote works in these challenging times. Also great findings and recommendations from Gartner. And today we'll see why Citrix Workspace, powered by our Citrix Virtual Apps in Desktops and Citrix Managed Desktops, can be the solution you're looking for to enable secure remote work to your employees. And also how our partners like Guardicore here with us today with their network segmentation solution can really complement and enhance security for your Citrix infrastructure. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly comment regarding the latest events. The health and safety of our customers, partners, and communities remain our top priority. We are working tirelessly to do everything we can to assist our customers to maintain safe, secure, and then uninterrupted operations throughout this global challenge. We also have our business continuity support content available on our website at citrix.com to help you with your ongoing plans. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your local Citrix reps for any questions or assistance. All right, so as Avishak pointed out, some of the key challenges with enabling secure remote work. Let's take a look at what's really required to set up that ideal secure digital workspace. So a comprehensive digital workspace solution needs to include all your apps, desktops, and this is not limited to your virtual apps and desktops, but also your mobile, SaaS, and your apps and desktops on Linux operating systems. It's not about just having all those apps, but also having a centralized way to aggregate, secure, and present all these apps in a unified app catalog. And with your apps comes content, and centralizing all the different ways content is being shared and collaborated on within your user community. And these are just the digital resources, but what about the actual devices used to access that content? This is why having a unified endpoint management solution is so crucial. And to connect these devices to those digital resources will need a secure network, and providing visibility and insights that promote security and also ensure an optimal user experience will certainly drive us all to our key objective. And last but not least, one centralized way for users to securely access everything they need to be productive from anywhere. So what you see on the screen is the Citrix Workspace. It's everything. It basically has everything available for an employee to get his work done without having to switch screens or having to remember a lot of URLs, usernames, and passwords. Basically reducing the context switching, and improving productivity. It has users hosted Windows apps and desktops, which could be on their on-premise Citrix sites, cloud-hosted Windows apps, their SaaS applications, their VDIs, which could be hosted on the cloud, on-premises, or even Microsoft's Windows virtual desktops, and all their local and cloud file storage available in one single place. And with single sign-on, all these apps and desktops are signed on without having the user needing to enter passwords again and again. So what you just saw was how Citrix Workspace looks today, but we are continuing to make enhancements to Workspace into the future. We are introducing, it's already available. It's called the Intelligent Experience for Citrix Workspace. So it's a workspace that no longer exposes the underbelly of your IT infrastructure or the complexity of your application portfolio to your users. Instead, it removes all of that complexity by serving up all your apps, desktops, and files, regardless of whether an app is SaaS or virtualized. your files, which may sit in a network drive or in a cloud-based file sharing service, or you could be using any of the public clouds and presents them in a way that removes the noise and makes it extremely simple and natural to act by. To point out a few, providing something called a quick assisted way to search, so your employees can find content or find apps which can serve those content. Offering a streamlined personalized feed that aggregates timely notifications and key insights from all the applications that user personally needs and uses. It also allows you to pin a set of common recommended actions like searching an employee directory or submitting a help desk ticket, and showing the most recent apps, desktops, and files in the most in some structure. And last but not the least, and this is really cool, and if a task requires more than one button click, it serves up a micro app which pops up as a small box and simply presents the fields that the user may need to alter. So in summary, only Citrix Workspace provides a solution for every user. And with this, I'll just shift gears a little bit and talk about Citrix virtual apps and desktops, which really helps power the Citrix Workspace. So when we talk about Citrix virtual apps and desktops, we like to focus on our core product investment principles, which are experience, which is delivering the best possible user experience on any device, security, which is inherently part of Citrix virtual apps and desktops by design, but we continue to invest product security features and capabilities that strengthen the overall security of the solution. And our partners with us here today, like Guardicore, really help complement and make Citrix infrastructure even more secure. And the third one is the choice. And by that, we mean IT should have the choice over their infrastructure and cloud providers, and they should also have the choice in management and monitoring tools which they want to use. I wanted to dig a little into our security offering with Citrix virtual apps and desktops, and then hand it over to Avishag on how Guardicore really complements our solution. So how do we adjust user security or user activity based on the security requirements? We want to ensure that a user can be productive on a device in any location, but we need to adjust the breadth of user access based on the information regarding the device, network, or task. We believe security is simply not a black and white solution of access granted or access denied. Security solutions should dynamically adjust to protect sensitive IT resources while keeping users productive. And you can see some of the, just waiting for the screen to change. Avisha, could you move to the next slide?
Yeah, have you lost control?
Yeah, seems like.
Let me see here.
Oh, perfect. So you can see some of the policy controls, which security policy controls, which come out of the box with Citrix virtual apps and desktops. And all these policies can work together while evaluating the user connection scenario to dynamically adjust permission based on both the application, network, and device from which the user is connecting. And here's one more security offering within Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, which is session monitoring and session watermarking. And here you can see the name of the administrator and device from which the user is accessing their session, watermarked repeatedly on the screen. And in today's world, where anything and everything can be captured on a mobile device, IT organizations need to not only protect their sensitive data, but also prevent theft of the data. And last but not the least, the app protection policies, which we recently introduced. And for those who are not familiar with app protection policies, it's an add-on feature that provides enhanced security when using Citrix Workspace app. Two of the policies, which is anti-key logging and anti-screen capture capabilities, really help protect data from keyloggers and screen scrapers capturing secure information. And finally, I wanted to touch a little bit upon Citrix Managed Desktops, or CMD. This is our turnkey offering where everything can be managed by Citrix for our customers. It's a complete DaaS solution. And it's simple, fast, and we've seen customers. We've set it up for customers within a few hours. So, and it's designed and built to work on Microsoft Azure with the option to have Citrix manage the entire infrastructure, or we could leverage that to the customer based on their needs. And it's an HDX high definition technology is an added component that goes without the saying. It provides the best user experience, and it has convenient billing and pay-as-you-go models. And with that said, I'm handing it back to Avishag. Avishag, please take it over.
Thanks, Anil. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Guardicore's approach and what we can provide. So what Guardicore provides is complete visibility into your whole data center, regardless of the infrastructure that you're using. So it can be an on-premises bare metal server, it can be a virtual machine on-premises or in the cloud, it can be a container, it even can be serverless. So what we provide you is first and foremost complete visibility into your whole environment, of course, including virtual desktops and virtual applications and endpoints as well. So the ability to visualize your whole environment from this single view, this single screen. And when we talk about visibility, we mean access and connection. So what are my assets in the network trying to access? What are they communicating with? And we'll see a real live demo of this in a minute. Guardicore is completely infrastructure agnostic, and on top of this visibility that we provide to visualize the whole data center, we also enable you to create a single policy from this single view. And this policy is a policy to set segmentation rules to say how my applications can actually talk. If it's environment segmentation, application ring fencing, protecting your digital crown jewels, it's all available from this single view with a single control panel. There's no networking changes required, no downtime, no dependency on the networking team. It's easy, fast to manage, and swift to deploy. It's future ready, and it works with any of your existing automation environments. So how does it actually work? Guardicore provides you an agent that you install on each virtual machine, cloud instance, container node, or your bare metal servers, and of course, virtual desktops as well. And those agents communicate with a centralized management server that enables you that single view and point of view to control everything. What we do is we make segmentation simple. We take projects from years and we end them in months by first and foremost providing you visibility down to the most granular level of each asset that you have and each connection that that asset initiates. So we show you visibility down to the process and user level that actually initiates each connection, and we also can show you the command line that was used to execute that process. On top of this visibility of all the assets, we introduce intelligent labeling that enables you to give context to those assets. Is that asset my billing application within my production environment? Or is this my virtual desktop in a Citrix environment, for example? And we give this visibility, we provide it real time as well as historically, and we'll see that in a moment. We provide support for any segmentation use case. A few of these are listed here, such as separating environments, setting rules to say, I want to control how my development environment can access my production environment, for example, set ring fencing rules for your critical digital crown jewel applications to control what those dependencies are for that application and who can access that application. Micro-segmentation of an application, as well as other segmentation use cases that we will see today oriented towards user environments. So how does Guardicore and Citrix come together here? Let me just see if this is passing. Yeah. So Citrix and Guardicore, what do we provide together that is better together? First and foremost, we enable business continuity without compromising on security. The ability to set up a user environment in a swift manner and set the right policy and controls for it to be able to enable users the access that they need while also preventing them the access they shouldn't have. We provide digital crown jewel protection of your critical applications, as well as lateral movement prevention and preventing that access from one asset to another that shouldn't be available. We accelerate compliance and simplify it from PCI compliance to SWIFT compliance to other types of compliance regulations. It's securing your cloud environment, your PaaS adoption, and enabling you to migrate faster to the cloud and apply user identity policies down to the most granular level to control and visualize what your users are doing from this single view. What does Guardicore's user access management provide you? Again, first and foremost, visibility down to every endpoint. It can be a laptop with VPN, a virtual desktop environment, or a virtual application with Citrix, for example. We provide this visibility down to the user level, user connection visibility, process level, and again, command line as well. And we provide you security, multiple different use cases to secure your user environment, and we'll cover several of these. The first one is access control everywhere. It's the ability to set policies for your users anywhere that they might reside to be able to say what they can access and, of course, prevent them from accessing what they shouldn't. We also provide you the ability to control multiple users, even if they're using the same jump box or terminal server. So it's the ability to take multiple groups of users that might need, without Guardicore, to use different jump boxes per each user group and consolidate them into that one box while using Guardicore's rules to be able to control what they can access and make sure that they only access what they should. It's also enabling the same level of control for third parties. For example, if you have third-party providers or administrators that need access, you can also, of course, use Guardicore to control third-party access, which can, of course, introduce a lot of risk if not controlled adequately. We provide peer-to-peer isolation. So within that user environment, you might want to set policies to say how my one user can access another user's virtual desktop, for example. Can one user do an RDP connection, a remote desktop connection to another user's laptop, for example? And of course, controlling what users can access in the internet, what they can access. So making sure that they only access, for example, the SaaS services that they need access to while preventing them any other access while they're using your environment. And doing all of this while reducing costs. It's fewer jump boxes, fewer terminal servers, and it's also simple to manage. It's software-based. It's a single pane of glass, the single view for your whole data center, including your user environment. And we can deploy with no downtime, and of course policies as well, and rollout of policies with no downtime at any point, no network changes. It's very fast and cost effective at scale. So let's cover a few of these use cases. Let's talk about visualizing and controlling user access anywhere. We'll start with visibility, what Guardicore can provide you, the visibility to see and manage what your users can access. What we see here is Guardicore's reveal map. And the first thing that you can see in the reveal map is different environments. Now, before I dive into the grouping that we see here, I'd like to move to an ungrouped view, where you can actually see all the assets that we have running in this environment. So we have different servers here, and each server can be a bare metal server, a physical server. It can be a virtual server on premises in the cloud. It can be a Citrix virtual desktop, for example. It can be a laptop. So anything that you're a container, it can be anything that you're running in your environment, all covered with one solution. Now, as we mentioned before, we scale, and we'll also see a use case of Guardicore with Citrix together in a very large environment. So to be able to visualize assets in a huge environment, we also provide you context. You can visualize your environment in the way that you think of it. So for example, what you have here is grouping of the same assets that we've seen before, now based on the different environments that you see in this network. So we have a remote access environment, we have a production environment, a development environment, for example, and we can also focus on each environment. So let's double click the remote access, and we can actually see here that we have the Citrix application within our remote access environment. Now, I'm going to focus on what our Citrix application is accessing within production. And in this case, I can actually see that there are two applications that are being accessed from our Citrix environment within production. We have our billing application as well as the e-commerce application. And if I want to see, for example, what asset within Citrix is accessing this environment, I can see that in this case, it is a Citrix virtual application that is attempting this access. Now, to provide you more context for each connection, you can actually click on each connection to see exactly what the user is that initiated this connection. So in this case, we have Andy here, Andy B, who is a billing user, and we also have Doug E, who is an e-commerce user. So before we set up rules, we can actually see here that in both cases, in each connection, Andy as well as Doug both have the ability and have actually used that ability to initiate a connection to both billing as well as the e-commerce application. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set a couple of rules within this environment to make sure that Andy and Doug can only access the applications that they need access to. So in this case, Andy will only be able to access billing, while Doug should only be able to access the e-commerce application. So in this case, I'm moving to the segmentation rule screen. And what you can see here is a few rules that we've set up to secure the access from the remote access environment to our production applications. So in the first case, I've set up an allow rule here to permit traffic. And what I've said here is that as long as the source of the connection is our remote access environment, so Citrix, for example, and the users are the e-commerce users, so the e-commerce application users, in this case, Doug E. And as long as they the connection is initiated from this user group and from this environment, and as long as it's initiated also with these specific processes here, so Chrome and PuTTY, for example, then we will enable those users to communicate with the e-commerce application. Similarly, we're going to set up another rule for the remote access environment and billing users. In this case, it's Andy, and enabling them to access the billing application only. And the other rules that we've set up here is to say any other attempt from the remote access environment to access either e-commerce or billing will actively be blocked and alerted on by Guardicore. So if there'll be any attempt from any other user, for example, or even any other process or application to access the destination applications within production, those connections will actively be blocked. So what I want to do now is move to a Citrix environment and actually show you what actually happens when we use that connection. So I'm going to log on here as my Andy B, so the Andy who is the billing user. I'm going to use his access, and what we're going to do here is we're going to authenticate as Andy, and then I'll show you what actually happens once the rules are set in place. So I'm logging on as Andy here, and I have my Chrome application here, so my virtual application that is my Google Chrome. And I'm going to open, I'm not going to open my virtual desktop environment yet, but I'm going to open my workspace launcher. And I'm going to access Google Chrome as Andy B here from Citrix. And although I have access to the Chrome application, what we'll see here is that Andy B, who should only be accessing billing, can actually access billing successfully, while his attempts to access the e-commerce application are not going to succeed. So I'm accessing the billing application up here, and you can actively see the successful connection here. So we're connected to the LDAP server. And again, this is a demo, so it's just to show you that the connection was successful. And then I'm going to access the e-commerce application while I'm Andy and attempt to even initiate a connection to that application. And what you can actively see here is that we are actively blocked. I'm sorry that this wasn't in English. We tried to set it up in time, but we had a glitch here. So trust me, this says that the access here was actively blocked, and it also tells you to go check out your firewall rules, in this case, Guardicore. So what I'm going to do now is show you what this actually looks like in Guardicore. So what we attempted to do now was access again as Andy B using the Citrix virtual application that we have here. We attempted to access the billing application successfully while we were actively blocked while attempting to access the e-commerce application. So what does this look like on Guardicore's side? I've moved to our network log here, which is actually a log representation of the map that you've just seen a few minutes ago. And what you can see here is the following setup. What you can see here is that Andy B here attempted to connect to an e-commerce server from our Chrome application here. And you can actually see this attempt was actively blocked by Guardicore's agent on the source asset. So it was actively blocked by Guardicore. And the first attempt by Andy in this case was to access the billing application. And you can see here that this connection was allowed successfully and went through successfully and was established. So with Guardicore, you get both visibility in a map representation view to be able to visualize all the connections, as well as a log to be able to see what your users are attempting to access and what was actively blocked by Guardicore. So going back to what we just saw, we started with visibility into the whole environment. So a map representation of your whole environment, including your user environment, setting up the rules to control what your users can access, even if they can use the same application on the source, just making sure that they do not have the access to applications that they shouldn't have access to, and preventing lateral movement, and then of course the ability to alert on those such connections. So another use case that we have here is securing access based on the user's identity, even if it's multiple users using the same box. So it's the same thing that we've seen before, just this time Andy and Doug, our users here, should only be able to access the dedicated applications that they need access to, while preventing that ability to access each other's applications, even if they're using the same jump box or the same terminal server, and in this way reducing infrastructure costs. So being able to consolidate the amount of different user groups using the same jump box and setting up rules with Guardicore easily without having to change any network configuration and set up firewall rules, etc. So the ability to set everything from a single pane of glass, even if users are using the same jump box or terminal server. This, of course, also applies to third-party access management and control. So if your third-party providers are accessing your environment and they have a user in your domain, then Guardicore can actively help to set policies and make sure that they can only access the applications that they should from that single view, that single screen, while preventing them access to any other application within your environment. And the third use case here is peer-to-peer isolation. So the ability to say within my user environment how everything should communicate. So how my different users, what they can actually access within the user environment. And what we've seen customers do is set up rules to say, no user can access another user's virtual desktop or laptop, for example, unless it's an administrative user. So unless it's an administrator, lateral movement or the ability to, for example, perform a remote desktop connection to another virtual desktop will actively be blocked unless it's an administrator in the network. So let's see what this actively looks like in Guardicore. So what I have here again is I've set up some rules here, very simple 2 rules to say anything trying to perform a connection between my remote access environment to my other remote access environment, to my same remote access environment. So anything within my remote access environment is permitted, is allowed only if it comes from my administrators in the network. And of course, restricting it to the relevant ports, so RDP and SSH, and making sure that remote access here is only permitted if it's administrators using RDP, remote desktop, and SSH. While any other attempt to perform such a connection over remote desktop or SSH in the remote access environment, so in my virtual desktop environment, in my user environment, will actively be blocked. So any other attempts. Let's see what this looks like on a Citrix environment. So I still have Andy here, and Andy is not a network administrator. Andy here is a billing user, but not a network administrator. So before I attempt the access here, I'm also going to log in as a network administrator. And in this case, I'm going to be Carl A. And Carl is a network administrator in this case, but is not a billing user, for example. So Carl will actively be able to access other virtual desktop environments, while his ability to access other applications will not be possible. So I'm opening up a virtual desktop here as Carl. And at the same time, I'm going to initiate another connection here to a virtual desktop as Andy B. So let's just establish this right here. I'm going to open a command line just to show you that we are actively Carl in this case. So you can see here that I'm authenticated as Carl to this environment. Now in the other virtual desktop, let me just make sure that you can all see this. We are logged in as Andy B. So of course the one is Carl, the other one is Andy B. So in the case of Carl, let's see what happens when I try to access another virtual desktop. Very easily, I have these RDP connections here set up in advance. So I've just double clicked the first one here, and you can see that I'm automatically prompted to enter my credentials and authenticate as Carl to another virtual desktop, since he is an administrator in the network. But while I'm Andy B here, I'm going to try and attempt to connect to another virtual desktop here, and we'll see if that is a successful connection. And you can see here there is this long attempt to connect to this environment, to the other virtual desktop, and it will eventually fail since Guardicore is blocking this connection and is not enabling Andy here, who is not a network administrator, the access to this environment. And again, you are prompted here in saying that you do not have the ability to access this virtual desktop. So very easily here, we set up 2 connections, and let's see what this looks like on Guardicore's side. So moving on to Guardicore, now I'm back on Guardicore Reveal Map, and I have the map here set up to focus within the remote access environment. So I've drilled down all the way to the specific virtual desktops within my Citrix environment here, and I can see a couple of different virtual desktops. And the first connection that I can see here is my connection from Carl. And this is an established connection here. It's a successful connection over RDP attempted by Carl. And if I double click this here, I can actually see down to the specific process that was used to initiate this connection. And I can also see here the command line that was used to initiate this connection. So Carl was actively able to attempt this connection. And another case here is our blocked connection. And in this case, this blocked connection here, the dotted red line from another virtual desktop to a virtual desktop, was attempted by Andy B, and this was actively blocked by Guardicore, successfully blocked. And again, if I want to visualize the different processes, both the listening process for Carl's connection as well as the initiating process as Andy, I can actually visualize this again down to the command line used to initiate this connection. So again, just to remind you what we saw here, we saw the following. We set up a couple of rules to control the access within the user environment, what my different users can access down to user level, saying only administrators, in this case Carl, can access other virtual desktops over remote desktop protocol, while any other attempted connection by any other user is actively blocked. And we, of course, are able to visualize this down to the most granular level. So a few other use cases here. Basically, the last use case here is the ability to control what your users do when they attempt to access the internet. So very easily set up rules to say from my virtual environment, from my user environment, what they can access in the internet to make sure that they can only access what they should, such as your SaaS platforms. And this, of course, is super easy with Guardicore. 2 simple rules. You set up a rule to say anything from my remote access environment to any number of domains in the internet is permitted, and you can, of course, restrict it down to processes should you wish to, and any other attempt to communicate with the internet is actively blocked. So what do you gain? What are the benefits of using Guardicore's user identity access management? The first and foremost, it's risk reduction, reducing risk by the ability to visualize and understand exactly what your users are doing, and then, of course, controlling that access from this single view, whether it's a user environment attempting to access the data center within the user environment, users within the data center, you have that single pane of glass to control that access if it's on premises or in the cloud. It's extremely simple to implement. It's very simple rules with context to control what you see, a flexible policy engine with multiple use cases and numerous use cases that is supported. We saw a few of them today, but again, we can do environment segmentation, application, ring fencing, and other use cases as well, and of course, visibility, and do this all with lower costs. And here's a real world use case of Guardicore and Citrix together in a Fortune 50 bank. Let's talk about the setup before Guardicore was introduced into the environment, and of course, after Guardicore. So before Guardicore was introduced into this environment, what you can see here was that there was a Citrix jump box installed in place. And what that jump box enabled users to do was actually to access applications within a VMware environment or within a cloud environment, in this case, Azure. And there was legitimate traffic from that Citrix environment to these applications. But without Guardicore, what they had to put in place was the ability to set controls to say that users should only access the applications they need access to within Azure or within VMware, but also to say within those VLANs, within Azure, within that VMware ESX environment, the ability to set controls and say what users can access between those environments. So once a user has accessed a virtual machine, either in VMware or in Azure, make sure that they cannot access each other's systems. So without Guardicore, what they attempted to do was to set up different firewalls and to set up these controls. And they estimated the firewall project would take them over 1 year to implement. Just these simple rules of saying what can communicate within these different environments and which users can actually communicate within these environments. So after Guardicore, very simply what we did was set up the same rules as you've seen before to say anything within my VMware environment is not able to communicate with one another. It has to come from the Citrix jump box. Similarly, within Azure, and of course prevent insecure protocols across any environment such as Telnet and FTP. And with Guardicore, this project took around 4 months to secure 15,000 servers. So the ability to actually make sure that these users in a very large environment can actually access only the applications that they should in a very simple manner. And this took around 4 months to implement. And this is one of the use cases that we saw before. So what is Guardicore offering today? Today, to be able to support our customers and companies around the world, we are offering complimentary service to the community. We are offering free Guardicore licenses for virtual desktop environments and users. And this is our way of helping during these times of disruption, our ability to help you control what your users can access. And this is a free offer that is valid until the end of this year, until the end of 2020. And the benefits that you will gain from this are to prevent lateral movement, the ability to, as we've seen, very simply control what your users can access and make sure that they only access that. It's also the ability to enforce policies down to that user level. So it's not only visibility to the different applications that you have and to your virtual environment, it's also the ability to enforce user-based policies and control what users can access. So you also, again, gain visibility down to the most granular control. You get rid of those blind spots, and you can now understand what your users are doing, what they are attempting to access, and of course, set the policies to prevent them the access they shouldn't have. It's simple to deploy. It's all software-based. It's very quick deployment, and you can, of course, secure virtual applications as well as desktops, and this is, of course, valid for Citrix virtual desktops. The Guardicore license is valid for Citrix virtual desktops as well. At this time, I'm going to pass this back to Manasa to open it up for questions.
Sure, thanks, Avishag. We have a few questions coming in. I think we can take up a couple. The first one is, how do we make sure the agent is present on each machine that was pinned?
Thanks, Manasa. So to be able to make sure that the agent is present on any virtual desktop, what we basically offer is the ability to bake the agent into the golden image, into the image of the virtual desktop that is provisioned. And you can then easily spin up any virtual desktop upon user request, and the agent will already be baked into that virtual desktop.
That's great. So as a follow-up, does it also have an agentless solution is the next question.
So right now, the solution is agent-based, since our agent is also the point of enforcement. So the ability to control this access is done by the agent. So today you would have to have an agent present.
Great, thank you. The other question we have is, what types of platform does Guardicore support?
Thank you. So Guardicore, of course, supports Citrix virtual applications as well as Citrix virtual desktops. We support VMware Horizon, Huawei Fusion, AWS Workspaces, so AWS Desktop as a Service, for example, and many other platforms as well. So these are a couple of examples.
Okay, does Guardicore also offer on-prem solution?
Yes, we can, of course, be SaaS-based as well as completely on-prem. So yes.
And as a follow-up to the previous question, does the agent support Windows 7 too?
Yes, when our agent supports Windows 7, we actually our agent supports all the way back to Windows XP. So we do legacy as well.
Okay. We have one question around any timeline for the free offer to VDI users.
Yes, so this offer is valid until the end of 2020, so until the end of this year. And again, this is a service to the community to be able to support the large scale of users attempting to now access the environment.
Okay, any comments on the bandwidth usage?
This is something that, of course, if you leave us your details, we'll be happy to respond to. It's extremely small. To the effect of, I do not have the number, sadly, to share at the moment, but I will gladly share that information with you if you can leave us your contact details, and we'll get back to you with the exact details.
Great, and I also have a question around if the presentation will be shared. I think I can take that one. We will definitely share the webinar in a few days to all the attendees, the recorded version. Apart from that, if you would need the presentation, the PPT especially, I suggest you please reach out to us individually, and one of the speakers will get back to you on that one. Avishag, is that okay?
Yeah, wonderful.
Great. And how does a person redeem the Guardicore free offer? There are quite a few questions on this one regarding the free offer.
Wonderful. So to be able to redeem it, just simply contact us. You can either request a demo or contact us even on Twitter at Guardicore, or contact us at our website, guardicore.com, and of course leave your details here. We can either get back to you, or you can contact us directly, and we will happily give you more details about the offer and help you set it up.
Great. I think we are just running out of time. So please feel free to reach out to us, like Avishag and Anil mentioned in their respective talks. And if there are any other questions, they'll be happy to take it offline. And again, to repeat myself, you will receive the recording of the webinar in a few days, probably by next week. And with that, Avishag and Anil, any last comments?
Just to thank everybody for their time, and stay safe and healthy.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees and our speakers for a lovely webinar. We look forward to interacting with you in future as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Manasa and Avishag. Good night.
Thanks, Manasa. Thanks, Anil.
Sure.
Good night.
Bye.